Alright, welcome to our quick review, kind of for just definitional purposes. What are cities? The slides were designed to accompany the book People, Places, and Culture, and I am Ms. Gall, and I will be your host for this lecture. So, really quick, when we talk about cities, oftentimes we use the term urban, which is really just another way of saying the built-up space of central cities and their suburbs. So if we were going to use this definition here locally, we live in the Seattle area. Seattle would be the central city, and then we've got the suburbs that would include places like Montlake Terrace, Tukwila, Bellevue, Kirkland, Federal Way, Burien. Okay. All of that built up space, that's all urban space. And really it includes pretty much everything in the city itself and all of the surrounding environments that are connected to the city in some way. Okay. And another key piece of this, okay, is that what we're talking about urban areas, are areas that are distinctively non-rural and non-agricultural. So again, in the Seattle area, you could potentially make the argument, for instance, for parts of kind of that Kent Auburn area that are agricultural, like where the Smith Brothers farm is, or Carpenito Brothers pumpkin patch, right, and where their farm is, that's actually agricultural land, and so it's not urban space. Okay? Just some things to keep in mind. Great definition for a city, not one that a teenager would come up with, but a great definition for a city is to talk about cities as being an agglomeration of people and buildings clustered together to serve as a center of politics, culture, and economics. Okay. And in English, really what that means, so remember, agglomeration is just another way of saying like a cluster. So a cluster or a grouping of people and buildings that come together and as a result serve as a center of politics, culture, economics. So when you stop and think, we talk about, say, the politics, right here in Washington State, the politics are very divided, for instance, east versus west. Well, the western part of the state, right, the part west of the Cascade Mountains, is very urban. Arguably, right, the urban areas really stretch all the way down, even north, all the way as far north as Everett, all the way down well past Tacoma into University Place and some of the suburbs of Tacoma is all one big built-up urban area, right? And as a result, it has an outsized weight in terms of politics, or what would appear to be outsized weight when we stop and look at how much actual land territory we're talking about, because it's roughly 1/3 or 1/4 of the state that's west of the Cascade Mountains. Then you got the other 2/3 to 3/4 that's east of the mountains, right? That does not have as much political influence, in part because it doesn't have as many people and it's not as built up. We wanted to talk about the culture of Washington State and where one goes if one wants to observe major cultural events or attend major cultural venues. Again, the city of Seattle is what comes to mind. You want to go to the art museum, you go to the SAM, right? The Seattle Art Museum. Tacoma has an art museum too. It's just not as large. And some of the other cities, I'm sure, have art museums as well, right? If you want to go to a play, you go to the Paramount or the Fifth Avenue. These are what we mean when we talk about culture, right? And the ways in which cities can serve as the center of culture. But cities also serve as economic centers. So they provide services. They provide job opportunities to people. They become really the center of the economy. Right? Arguably, most people who live in Western Washington, if they don't work in Seattle, they work in support of people who work in Seattle. Right? Or Tacoma being the other major city here. So, just to kind of wrap this up, go ahead and look at a world map here. And what this map really looks at is the urban population as a percentage of the total population. So it comes from 2012, which means the information is probably a year or two older. So a little bit dated, but overall not too bad. And not so, we see some things that, if you stop and think about it, not super surprising, right? We talk about areas that are 70% or more urbanized, so roughly 2/3 of people live in cities. We're looking at our highly developed or our mid-level developed areas for the most part, right? Then we start to get down that 55 to 69%. Now we're looking at lesser developed, and then on down the line there. What's important to note, though, is that what this is really looking at is the percentage of people who already live in cities. If we were going to talk about the rate at which countries are urbanizing, this would actually be a very different map. And our most rapidly urbanizing areas are the ones that are the poorest. So in poorer areas of the world, people are moving into cities at much, much faster rates than they are in the more developed world. And actually, arguably, in parts of the more developed world, especially in North America, and in particular here in the US, people are actually moving away from cities, or have been. I've seen a lot of discussion lately talks about millennials, which is to say folks who were born roughly between 1980 and about 1985 or so, as being increasingly urbanized and wanting to live in cities. So it's kind of this interesting swing back and forth. This has been our quick review, just to talk a little bit about defining what is a city, right? And again, it's that agglomeration or that clustering, that grouping of people and buildings to serve as a center of politics, economics, and culture. I really happen to like that particular definition. And we talked a little bit about what is urban space, which is to say space that's part of the built-up environment, and that's distinctly not rural, and it's distinctly not agricultural. So we can have agricultural space that is close to urban areas, that borders urban areas, that's surrounded by urban areas, but is not in and of itself urbanized, which is an important thing to note. And then we ended by looking at our world map here and talking about where we find the largest urban populations as percentages of total populations, and also a little bit about where the most rapidly most rapidly urbanizing areas of the world are, and how that would be a very different map if we were looking at that number. So if you have any questions, I'd invite you to bring them into class, and I'd be delighted to answer any questions that you have.